This Sunday, a special edition of Meet the Press, live from New Hampshire. The last debate before the first in the nation Republican presidential primary. Voting here is just 48 hours away. We come to the Granite State, where nearly 1 in 5 voters remains undecided, despite seeing these candidates face to face in town halls, coffee shops, and even in their living rooms. A small state that will have a big impact on the race. Their motto, live free or die. The issues, jobs and the economy, America's role in the world, and which of these candidates is best suited to take on President Obama. This morning, a debate in partnership with Facebook, the world's #1 social platform, and the New Hampshire union leader. The candidates, the issues, and your questions.
This is the NBC News Facebook Republican Candidates Debate from the Capitol Center for the Arts in Concord, New Hampshire. Here now, the moderator of Meet the Press, David Gregory.
And good morning and welcome to this special edition of Meet the Press, the final debate before New Hampshire voting begins. All 6 candidates are here, and before we begin, you know the drill. We quickly go through the rules. Each candidate will have 1 minute, 60 seconds to make their statement, to respond to questions, and at my discretion, 30 seconds for follow-ups or rebuttals. We're on a pretty tight schedule, so I will ask the candidates to stay within their allotted time, and we'll see how that goes. We've partnered with Facebook, so some of the questions will come from me, and some, of course, will come from you. We encourage you to weigh in on the debate in real time. Our online app at mtp.msnbc.com. You can monitor the conversation there, and we'll see some of your feedback during that debate over the course of this debate. Candidates, good morning.
Good morning.
I just want to say on behalf of all Americans that I thank you for being willing to debate each other every 10 hours, whether you feel you need it or not. This is an important moment. Elections are about choices. They're about distinguishing one from the other. There's a political element to that, and of course it has to do with policy as well. Governor Romney has won the Iowa caucuses, although narrowly. He's up in the polls here in New Hampshire. He's also up in the polls down in South Carolina. Speaker Gingrich, why shouldn't Governor Romney be the nominee of this party? What about his record concerns you most or makes him disqualified to be the nominee?
Well, look, I think what Republicans have to ask is who's most likely in the long run to survive against the kind of billion-dollar campaign the Obama team is going to run. And I think that a bold Reagan conservative with a very strong economic plan is a lot more likely to succeed in that campaign than a relatively timid Massachusetts moderate who even the Wall Street Journal said had an economic plan so timid it resembled Obama. So I think you've got to look at, Massachusetts was 4th from the bottom in job creation under Governor Romney. We created 11 million jobs while I was Speaker, and I worked with President Reagan in the entire recovery of the 1980s. I just think there's a huge difference between a Reagan conservative and somebody who comes out of the Massachusetts culture with an essentially moderate record, who I think will have a very hard time in a debate with President Obama.
Speaker Gingrich, bottom line, you believe that Governor Romney is unelectable? No,
I don't believe he's unelectable. I think I look against Obama's record. I think, the fact is President Obama's going to have a very hard re-election effort. But I do think the bigger the contrast, the bolder ideas, the clearer the choice, the harder it is for that billion-dollar campaign to smear his way back into office.
Speaker, this is your flyer that you're circulating here in New Hampshire. It says very clearly Romney is not electable.
I think he will have a very hard time getting elected.
Governor?
David, I'm very proud of the record that I have, and I think the one thing you can't fool the people about New Hampshire about is the record of a governor next door. And people have watched me over my term as governor and saw that I was a solid conservative and that I brought important change to Massachusetts. They recognized that I cut taxes 19 times, balanced the budget every one of the 4 years I was governor, put in place a $2 billion rainy day fund by the time I'd gone. We'd seen job losses in the months leading up to my becoming the governor, and then we began to finally create jobs. By the way, we created more jobs in Massachusetts than Barack Obama's created in the entire country. We also got our state police to enforce illegal immigration laws, put in place English immersion in our schools. I'm very proud of the conservative record I have, and I think that's why some of the leading conservatives in today's world who are fighting the conservative battles of today that don't have any axe to grind have gotten behind my campaign. Governor Nikki Haley of South Carolina, Governor Chris Christie of New Jersey, right here, the great Senator of New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte. These are conservatives who looked at my record, looked at my plan to get this economy going. I happen to believe that if we want to replace a lifetime politician like Barack Obama, who had no experience leading anything, you have to choose someone who's not been a lifelong politician, who has not spent his entire career in Washington, and instead has proven time and again he can lead in the private sector twice, in the Olympics, and as a governor. We've got to nominate a leader if we're going to replace someone who is not a leader.
Well, Senator Santorum, had you not lost for re-election in 2006, you would have been in Washington even longer than you were. It would have been 21 years, so you've got a long Washington record. How do you address this question? Why shouldn't Governor Romney be the nominee? What is disqualifying in your judgment?
Well, if his record was so great as governor of Massachusetts, why didn't you run for re-election? I mean, if you didn't want to even stand before the people of Massachusetts and run on your record, if it was that great, why did you bail out? I mean, the bottom line is, I go and fight the fight. If it was that important to the people of Massachusetts that you were going to go and fight for them, at least you could stand up and make the battle that you did a good job. I did that. I ran for re-election a couple of times, and I won a couple of times. And in a 71% Democratic district, when I ran for re-election, I was redistricted. And I was in a 71% Democratic district, had a 90% conservative voting record. It was a hard thing to do. My district was more Democrat than the state of Massachusetts that I ran in. It was the Steel Valley of Pittsburgh. And I stood up and fought for the conservative principles. I didn't do what Governor Romney did in 1994. I was running the same year he ran in 1994. I ran in a tough state of Pennsylvania against an incumbent. Governor Romney lost by almost 20 points. Why? Because at the end of that campaign, he wouldn't stand up for conservative principles. He ran from Ronald Reagan. And he said he was going to be to the left of Ted Kennedy on gay rights, on abortion, a whole host of other issues. We want someone when the time gets tough, and it will in this election. We want someone who's going to stand up and fight for the conservative principles, not bail out and not run to the left of Ted Kennedy.
Well, you did say when you endorsed him 4 years ago, just those words, that he would stand up for conservative principles, Senator.
Vis-a-vis John McCain.
Vis-a-vis John McCain. Governor, your response.
Well, a lot of things that were inaccurate in that, and I'm not going to go through them one by one, but I can tell you this. I think it's unusual and perhaps understandable that people who spend their life in politics imagine that if you get in politics, that's all you want to do. That if you've been elected to something, well, you want to get reelected and reelected. I went to Massachusetts to make a difference. I didn't go there to begin a political career running time and time again. I made a difference. I put in place the things I wanted to do. I listed out the accomplishments we wanted to pursue in our administration. There were 100 things we wanted to do. Those things I pursued aggressively. Some we won, some we didn't. Run again? That would be about me. I was trying to help get the state in as best shape as I possibly could. Left the world of politics, went back into business. Now I have the opportunity, I believe, to use the experience I have. You got a surprised look on your face. Wait, wait, it's still my time.
Are you going to tell people you're not going to run for re-election for president if you win?
Rick, it's still my time.
I'm just asking.
Okay. Well,
go ahead,
actually,
Governor Romney, take 30 seconds there.
Yeah. What I'm going to tell you is, this for me, politics is not a career. For me, my career was being in business and starting a business and making it successful. My life's passion has been my family, my faith, and my country. I believe by virtue of the experiences I've had that I'm in a good position to make a contribution to Washington. I long for a day when instead of having people who go to Washington for 20 and 30 years who get elected and then when they lose office, they stay there and make money as lobbyists or connecting to businesses, I think it stinks. I think we ought to have people go to Washington and serve Washington and serve as the people of their nation and go home. I'd like to see term limits in Washington.
So one term.
And so, as the President of the United States, if I'm elected, of course I'll fight for a second term.
Speaker Gingrich,
there's a lot of work to be done.
Take 30 seconds here to get it.
Mitt, I realize the red light doesn't mean anything to you because you're the front runner. but can we drop a little bit of the pious baloney? The fact is, you ran in '94 and lost. That's why you weren't serving the Senate with Rick Santorum. The fact is, you had a very bad re-election rating. You dropped out of office. You had been out of state for something like 200 days preparing to run for president. You didn't have this interlude of citizenship while you thought about what to do. You were running for president while you were governor. You were going all over the country. You were out of state consistently. You then promptly re-entered politics. You happened to lose to McCain, as you had lost to Kennedy. Now you're back running. You've been running consistently for years and years and years. So this idea that suddenly citizenship showed up in your mind, just level with the American people. You've been running for at least since the 1990s.
Governor, please.
Mr. Speaker, citizenship has always been on my mind. And I happened to see my dad run for governor when he was 54 years old. He had good advice to me. He said, Mitt, never get involved in politics if you have to win an election to pay a mortgage. If you find yourself in a position when you can serve, well, you ought to have a responsibility to do so if you think you can make a difference. He said, also, don't get involved in politics if your kids are still young, because it may turn their heads. I never thought I'd get involved in politics. When I saw Ted Kennedy running virtually unopposed in 1994, a man who I thought, by virtue of the policies of the liberal welfare state, had created a permanent underclass in America, I said, someone's got to run against him. And I happened to have been wise enough to realize I didn't have a ghost of a chance of beating him. This guy from Republican from Massachusetts was not going to beat Ted Kennedy. And I told my partners in my firm, I'll be back in 6 months. Don't take my chair. And I went in and gave it a real battle and went after him. I was happy that he had to take a mortgage out on his house to ultimately defeat me. And I'm very proud of the fact that I have stood up as a citizen to battle where I felt it was best for the nation. And we're talking about running for president. I'm in this race because I care about the country. I believe my background and experience will help me be an effective president.
Dr. Paul into this, because there is a question about who is the true conservative in the race. And Governor Romney said only 9 years ago during an interview with New England Cable News, he said the following: I think people recognize that I'm not a partisan Republican, that I'm someone who is moderate and my views are progressive. Do you believe Governor Romney now when he says that he is a man of constancy and that he'll stand up for conservative principles?
You know, I think this whole discussion so far has been very superficial. And I think the question, in a way, you ask is superficial in that you're talking about character, which is very important, but I think we should deal with the issues as well. But I don't see how we can do well against Obama if we have any candidate that, endorsed, single-payer systems and TARP bailouts and don't challenge the Federal Reserve's $15 trillion of injection bailing out their friends. I don't see how we can have anybody really compete with Obama who doesn't challenge this huge empire we have overseas and the overseas spending. I mean, this is how nations come down, is they extend themselves too far overseas. That's how the Soviets came down. We really have to talk about real cuts, and we haven't gotten around to this yet. So if we want to change things, this is what we have to talk about. Character is important and motivation is important. Our history is important, but I really consider that in the debate format to be less significant than what we really believe in.
You read my mind, Dr. Paul, and we're going to get to some of the tough choices, not just on politics, but on policy. First, Governor Perry, I do want to ask you, though, flat out, your stake in your campaign going down to South Carolina. Is Governor Romney unelectable in your judgment?
Well, I think you have to ask the question of who is it that can beat Obama? Who is it that can invigorate the Tea Party? Who is it that can take the message of smaller outsider government that's truly going to change that place? As I look from here down to Rick Santorum, I see insiders, individuals who have been the big spending Republicans in Washington, D.C. And let's be honest with ourselves. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Obama has thrown gasoline on the fire. But the bonfire was burning well before Obama got there. It was policies and spending, both from Wall Street and from the insiders in Washington, D.C., that got us in this problem. And we need a candidate that can not only draw that stark contrast between themselves and Barack Obama, but also stand up and lead the Tea Party movement back. 2010 was about the Tea Party standing up and understanding that Republicans, big spending Republicans, had caused as much of this problem as anything. And it was their power that brought together, that brought Washington, D.C. and the House to Republican control. And that's the kind of individual we got to have to lead
Before I
this
get to Governor Huntsman,
election.
I'd be remiss, Governor Romney, if I did not allow you to respond to the quote that I read from you 9 years ago. What would you say to conservatives so that they'll trust that you will stand up for conservative principles?
They've got my record as governor. That's the great thing in people here in New Hampshire is they see what I did as governor of Massachusetts. I also had the occasion after my last failed attempt to run for president, a learning experience, to sit down and write a book. And I wrote a book and described my view for the country. And people can describe it differing ways. But my view is that the principles that I've learned in business and the principles as governor